BlackRock has just shocked Bitcoin and is now buying massive amounts of Bitcoin. It's so crazy what's happening right now. We are so back. The Russian central bank reports that it is now planning a Bitcoin exchange here. The United Arab Emirates has just closed a Bitcoin mega deal that could enable Bitcoin purchases, worth billions here. Arthur Hayes assumes that Bitcoin will reach 200,000 this year. US dollars will shoot up due to shadows. And even stock market gurus like Mario Lothner are suddenly bullish on Bitcoin. But we also have very critical voices from the European Central Bank, which are now warning about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and the Trump policy that is too crypto-friendly. But let's take a look at the Bitcoin ETFs, and we can see it clearly here. Crazy. 20,000 Bitcoins were bought yesterday. Such massive amounts. BlackRock alone with 11,000 Bitcoins. And we can just see it here now. The Bitcoin ETFs are back again. There were phases of weakness, and now we are finally back. It's very important that we simply have the foundation. Here, the constant inflows into Bitcoin. And yes, please don't freak out again when I say BlackRock is buying Bitcoin. Of course, BlackRock is buying Bitcoin for their clients, and not for themselves, that's clear. And many people are still digesting the news from Jack Ma is that the new company 21 Capital wants to buy 42,000 Bitcoins and become MicroStrategy 2.0 here. And now there are very interesting announcements or very interesting predictions. There was a Twitter account that predicted exactly this, that a big announcement would come this week, and that 4 or rather 3 more big announcements will follow. And the first big announcement has already taken place, from Jack Ma and 21 Capital. I don't know how seriously this can be taken. Or how. Yes, evaluating something like this truthfully is definitely challenging. The first big announcement was definitely predicted correctly here. And now, apparently 3 more big announcements are supposed to follow in a short time. The KBC letter even assumes that a big announcement could come today, because Donald Trump is giving a speech later. And here, the KBC letter says that something very bullish is expected. However, there was also a bit of uncertainty, which led to a slight sell-off, because Donald Trump said that there are very good deals with China and so on in the works. China then denied the whole thing and said, no, there are no real deals in the works here. And yes, we are still very cautious here. And then a video was shared where, I believe it was the Ministry of Finance or something like that in China, also refuted all of this, stating that there are no real negotiations or proper deals currently happening. And then the really big thing happening here is the nation-state FOMO in Russia. Ray King, Russian Central Bank, and Ministry of Finance announced a national Bitcoin and crypto exchange. Nation-state. FOMO is now kicking in here. And many people have taken this very bullishly. We also need to take a look at what this is all about. Because here it says the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank. If you read it closely, it says that they are not planning a crypto exchange. They are indeed planning a crypto exchange, but only for super qualified investors. So there's a catch to the whole thing. That means they want to focus on Bitcoin, on a crypto exchange, but initially only for super qualified investors. What exactly that means, I don't know. There is also the current trial run where Bitcoin can be used for cross-border payments and such, but that's also partly only for selected institutions and so on. So it seems like they are setting up a test regime here in Russia and just trying it out. Certain people are allowed to try it out, and then they somehow gather experiences here. And if it goes well, they might roll it out further. It further states here that a crypto exchange for highly qualified investors will be established in Russia. The current regulation envisions either creating a crypto exchange from scratch or launching the crypto exchange on an already existing platform. According to Finance Minister Anton Siluanov, the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank will create a new stock exchange guru. And these are, of course, very positive developments. But the announcements really don't stop because it continues. Here, things are moving quickly. Now here, in the United Arab Emirates, we now see the first Islamic bank that allows its customers to buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin complies with ethical Islamic financial principles. The whole thing is huge. And Lionel talked about it a while ago, saying that this could get really crazy. I know Prince Philip of Serbia also talked about it in a podcast, saying that Bitcoin is actually in harmony with all the Islamic banking stuff and so on. I'm not entirely familiar with it, but there are certain religious rules followed in Islam. For example, interest is considered very bad. You're not allowed to have interest and so on. But all of that is fulfilled by Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not debt money. Bitcoin is not interest money. Rather, Bitcoin is essentially a full money, a fully backed reserve system. There is no credit money expansion or anything like that. There are 21 million Bitcoins. There's no credit or anything like that. And currently, we always have the credit money system. And that is just very critical to consider under Islamic religious law. As I said, I'm not a Muslim or anything, so don't take it too seriously, what I'm saying here. I'm not saying this from personal experience, but from what I've gathered, what you can research, and what other people sometimes say about it. And they assume that the Islamic states currently don't really have Bitcoin on their radar. But if they realize that Bitcoin is compliant with Islam, then all the Islamic states, not just the United Arab Emirates, would massively jump on the Bitcoin bandwagon. And that would, of course, trigger the next big Bitcoin hype. And we also know that Abu Dhabi is heavily involved in the Bitcoin game. The United Arab Emirates, they also want to somehow secure their wealth or perhaps even increase their wealth. Swap it over to Bitcoin. I am very, very convinced of that. There are also various considerations. There were even considerations that here, Saudi Aramco and such were getting to Bitcoin. I mean, that might be a bit far-fetched right now, but they potentially have a lot of opportunities to do Bitcoin mining. That means all the Eastern countries, whether it's Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Kuwait, Oman, whatever they're called, they are all potential candidates for Bitcoin here. And they all have huge wallets, of course. I mean, there are some sheiks and some state funds. They have more money than entire regions sometimes, or entire family dynasties here in Europe or in the USA. But it's not just the United Arab Emirates that are hyper-bullish here. Arthur Hayes also makes a new, massive statement and says here, the buyback of US Treasury bonds can massively add legitimacy to the dollar and potentially drive Bitcoin to 200,000 US dollars, according to the former CEO of BitMEX. So what he means by that is shadow QE because Scott Boston announced in an interview, it must have been about a week ago, that he wants to do Treasury buybacks here. And he doesn't want to do this through the central bank, but rather through the Treasury Department. And this is a type of money injection that doesn't exactly mean QE, because the money doesn't come from the central bank, but rather from the Treasury Department, and it would still lead to an increase in the money supply here. And Arthur Hayes strongly believes that this will happen. Arthur Hayes is currently very much in the bull camp because he simply assumes that the money printers will be turned on again. He constantly tweets that the yen carry trade is exploding, and that Japan will weld the money printing presses. China will do it, the USA will do it, and he simply says you have to. Getting to Bitcoin before the money printing press is turned on, then all the markets will go up. And when the money printers are turned off, then you basically have to get out of Bitcoin again. I mean, this is of course not a recommendation for action, because timing the market is always difficult, but this is the liquidity trade that Arthur Hayes always emphasizes greatly. But it's not just Arthur Hayes who is bullish. Take a look at what the stock market gurus from Germany have to say. Here is Mario Lochner with a segment. It hardly gets more bullish than this.
But now let's briefly switch to Bitcoin, because I find it very, very exciting right now, and we just have to say, since Liberation Day, since the 2nd April, stocks went down significantly. Here, -9, 10% for the US indices, but Bitcoin has remained stable. Of course, it performed much, much worse than gold. Gold has performed really strongly. Bitcoin, however, is more stable than US stocks, more stable than US bonds and the dollar. And from my perspective, that's already quite remarkable. Noteworthy. That's why I am currently bullish on Bitcoin, or still bullish. There was a significant pullback, but we need to keep things in perspective. Bitcoin is, of course, very volatile, and I think it has held up quite well under these difficult circumstances. A weaker dollar, we can take a look at this, has often been, in the past, a leading indicator. Typically, Bitcoin has benefited from a weaker dollar. Then, of course, we also have the halving cycle, which usually follows up significantly. The global money supply also speaks in favor of Bitcoin. Of course, there are many other reasons. Everything that applies to gold, or much of what applies to gold, also applies to Bitcoin, such as high debt and so on. And a few weeks ago, maybe it's even been a few months, I showed my Bitcoin pyramid here, how I would buy more. We can take a quick look at it again here, and that's why I'm going to increase my Bitcoin holdings again now. If it goes down further, I would of course buy a bit more. We're currently around $1,000, so I'm going to buy a bit more now.
Feel free to write in the comments below if you're just as bullish, if you're also buying more Bitcoin now. If you want to buy Bitcoin, I'll also put a link below to 21 Bitcoin, where you can easily and simply buy Bitcoin. With the code Bitcoin, you can even get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. Because it's getting even more bullish now. We've already been very, very bullish. And now comes the most bullish part. Hold on tight. The ECB is once again warning about Bitcoin and crypto. According to Politico, the European Central Bank warns that Trump's pro-crypto stance could trigger a financial contagion that might destabilize the European economy. So, they are really in panic mode here. It's crazy. And we also know that every time the ECB has warned about Bitcoin, Bitcoin has exploded afterward. There was also that very, very famous article, when Bitcoin was at 17,000 US dollars, where the TREZOR wrote that Bitcoin would now disappear into irrelevance. And what is it now? We're back at nearly 100,000 US dollars, not quite yet, but that's where we're heading. Should this be taken seriously? I don't think it needs to be taken seriously, but the EU should really question what kind of policy it is making here. Because instead of opening up to Bitcoin and crypto exchanges, they simply warn against the USA, Donald Trump, and crypto exchanges and Bitcoin. I mean, it's silly to say, okay, now there's a new technology, something like the internet, for example. And now we have participants on the internet saying, okay, we want to focus on the internet. We align ourselves with the rich. We connect with the rich. We align with the rich. But instead of stopping and using the internet to transmit into the spotlight, With Bitcoin, they continue to rely on, well, outdated methods, continue to align with the rich, but blame other countries for potentially lending here to the EU, which I don't agree with. A very, very dangerous situation is unfolding here. It further states that the ECB fears that a rise in US-backed stablecoins could lead to a flight of European capital to the USA. So, that would be the next concern here. This means, firstly, they fear a contagion, financial contagion through the crypto exchanges. I don't quite know exactly what they mean by financial contagion. And secondly, the flight of capital to the USA through stablecoins. So, it's not just that they are afraid of Bitcoin, of crypto exchanges, but they are also afraid of stablecoins, because no one wants an EU stablecoin. Absolutely no one. And that's also the big idea from Scott Bosson, who says he wants to further strengthen the US dollar by relying on stablecoins. And by relying on stablecoins, a lot of capital will simply flow into US Treasury bonds because the stablecoins are backed by US Treasury bonds. And that's a very, very interesting story that, well, the EU can't play out in the same way because no one really wants international euros or very, very few countries compared to the US dollar. And there's still a very, very high demand for US dollars. I mean, the euro is actually currently somewhat stronger than the US dollar. Even texted my sister, asking what happened with the exchange rate. Why is everything suddenly so strange with the US dollar and the euro? Well, simply because the euro has appreciated significantly. Or rather, the US dollar has depreciated. It's always like that. There was just recently an article, was it in the Bild newspaper or something, about gold reaching a record high or something like that. But the thing is, gold hasn't really risen in recent years. Gold has always remained stable. What always happens is that fiat currencies are constantly depreciating against gold. And you could say the same about Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't rise dramatically either. Rather, the other currencies are massively depreciating against gold or Bitcoin. But definitely, here's a big recommendation for you. This isn't my portfolio. It's a test portfolio here on CoinTracking. And here you can easily generate tax tools. You can optimally set up your taxes, your Bitcoin, your crypto exchange. You can also see it as a portfolio tracking tool. You can already see it. It creates a lot of statistics, a lot of insights into your portfolio. You can easily see if you're currently in the positive or in the negative. Are your Bitcoins tax-free? Are they not tax-free? Are they within the holding period or not? And that's a really great thing. You can sign up for CoinTracking for free at first if you use the code BTC, hotel users, but if you sign up for the pro account, you can get massive discounts here. I absolutely recommend it to you. I'll put a link to CoinTracking down here. Definitely check it out. Guys, also write in the comments what you think about the warnings from the ECB here. See you. Peace out.